and other kind of videos and stuff, the officers remain completely silent. They refuse to identify themselves when asked. Some of them don't appear to be having very many identifying patches for what type of law enforcement they actually are. And yeah, they are not identifying themselves very clearly whatsoever in any kind of conversations, just on the street, and especially if they're ever trying to like arrest someone and take them into a vehicle.
So can you confidently say that all of the people that are doing this are attached to law enforcement? Is it possible that there are some rogue actors also doing this as well? Or is this, from what you've seen, attached to a law enforcement arm, I guess a federal law enforcement arm, because it seems like the local authorities are not taking ownership of this?
Yeah, it's definitely not the local people, but from the type of gear I've seen these people in, it matches very closely to the type of border patrol people we've seen. And because we've seen these unmarked vehicles pulling into federal buildings, I'm personally confident that these are definitely associated with the federal government, because they've been pulling in, and just the type of gear they have is very, very professional. They are fully decked out with all of the kind of stuff. I'm not thinking it's any type of like rogue militia or anything like that, or at least I would want to see a lot more evidence supporting that before I would make such a claim.
Garrison Davis. Garrison, thank you for being our eyes on the ground out there. We appreciate all of your time.
Yeah, thank you.
And Chuck, over to you.
Well, Pete Williams, as promised, I'm coming back to you. I know you've spent the morning here trying to find out more. What is DHS up to? Chad Wolf, the acting DHS secretary, we know apparently was in Portland yesterday, but what more can you tell us about what you've learned?
Well, what we're being told by Homeland, I think you may have read a little of this statement earlier, is that based on the president's executive order and this task force that the Homeland Security Secretary then formed, these additional federal officials are in Portland and some other cities, mainly to protect federal facilities. Now, the question here, of course, is what about the video we've seen of officers walking down the street firing tear gas? What about the reports that they've made arrests of people who are on the street? What you can't tell in some of these videos is where they are in relation to federal facilities. But in terms of the obvious question about the people that are arrested off the street is, what's the probable cause? And we just haven't gotten a good answer to that question yet. They're aware of these questions. Obviously, the presence of the federal authorities in Portland has been one that's been very controversial. The authorities there, the local authorities, have said they don't want them, but the federal officials say they're there to protect federal facilities. And of course, that's what they do every day, and they certainly have the authority to surge the force it may take to do that. It's these other things that have raised questions, and we're still waiting for some answers, mainly on what the probable cause is for these arrests of people put in vehicles on the street.
Pete, do we know how many other cities where they've done this surging? Are they being transparent about that, or is that something that we're basically only if we ask do they tell us?
I suspect it's in a lot of cities. I just don't know for a fact, but it hasn't been controversial. I mean, remember, there are federal authorities at every federal building in America. So sure. Sometimes they're contract, sometimes they're Marshal Service, sometimes they're Federal Protective Service. Marshal Service, part of the Justice Department. Federal Protective Service, part of the Department of Homeland Security, which is what CBP. I will say this, that we've been told repeatedly by federal law enforcement officials that the pictures of these people that you've just been looking at in the video are not Marshal Service.
But they are not saying they're not related to the federal government. They're just saying.
Oh no. There's no question about that, and it's likely CBP, Customs and Border Protection.
Gotcha. Pete Williams, our Chief Justice Correspondent. Pete, thank you. And Katie, back to you.
And coming up next, there are growing demands for the release of a 15-year-old black girl sent to juvenile lockup because she didn't do her online homework. More on that story and the Michigan judge whose controversial decision is now under review.
How about no?
No.
No. Or high-quality silver American Eagles delivered to you or stored for you in an independent third-party vault. Call, learn, and
instead of trying.
That within 3 days after I had been taking it, I didn't have the pain anymore. It was almost like I'd never had it.
Looking at.
you've been helped.
Joy Reid is coming to primetime.
The news business is dynamic and probably has never been more important.
Elegant Water not only sells the best water softeners, but
be there every morning to keep you on top of it.
Instead of the traditional kind of judgment in your favor, Mr. Morales,
Episode Wednesday, 8/7 Central on CBS.
My name is Tabitha Thurman, and I've worked as an assistant prosecuting attorney, city prosecuting attorney, and a municipal court judge. For the past several years, I've been defending those accused of breaking the law. During those years, I've come to realize that people are not defined by one bad decision. Everyone deserves a second chance. For kind, compassionate, aggressive, and competent legal representation.
Be tolerant in a sense for letting the car stay there with that kind of money build up. The $500
At ket.org.
I grew up in Frankfort, Kentucky with my parents who opened the Smile of Siam, the first Thai restaurant in Frankfort in 1990. I spent a good chunk of my childhood, pretty much from age 7 to 18, working in that restaurant.
There's a space you can put a shooting star. It's just like that kind of ornament.
Well, today is your
really
day to pick
great.
it up. $26.52. They're going very quickly. H2193.
Driver. Now you need to be a rocket scientist.
Live. Open an account at greendot.com.
Mike Emanuel live outside FedEx Field, where the Redskins play in Landover, Maryland. Mike?
Harris, good afternoon. The owner of the franchise, Dan Snyder, is now responding to this explosive report saying, quote, "This story has strengthened my commitment to setting a new culture and standard for our team, a process that began with the hiring of Coach Rivera earlier this year. We will institute new policies and procedures and strengthen our human resources infrastructure to not only avoid these issues in the future, but most importantly, create a team culture that is respectful and inclusive of all." The NFL saying today, quote, "These matters as reported are serious, disturbing, and contrary to the NFL's values. Everyone in the NFL has the right to work in an environment free from any and all forms of harassment." 15 women, former employees of the Washington Redskins football franchise, alleged sexual harassment and verbal abuse. In the past week, 3 senior officials of the team were either fired or retired. Former employee Emily Applegate says it was the most miserable experience of her life, telling the Washington Post, quote, "I needed to keep my job. When it comes down to it, 98% of people make decisions on stuff like this based on needing to keep their jobs, which is why this stuff goes on for so long." Applegate spoke about the toxic culture at the team earlier today.
Nobody deserves to be degraded and treated like that. Nobody deserves to be disrespected. And for any of us women that want to get into a career that is a male-dominated force, we shouldn't be afraid that these are the things that are going to happen.
The team has hired attorney Beth Wilkinson, who told Fox her firm was retained to do an independent review of the team's culture, policies, and allegations of workplace misconduct. The NFL leadership is expected to meet with Wilkinson and her colleagues once she is done and is pledging to take any action. Harris?
Mike Emanuel, thank you very much. I'm joined now by Sam Fortier, sports reporter for the Washington Post. And Sam, this is your work. You looked into this. What does it mean for the Washington Redskins organization?
I think in addition to those complaints, I think they need a systemic review of their policies regarding these matters. I mean, there was the culture of sexual harassment, there was the culture of verbal abuse, but if you look at the HR reporting process to kind of deal with those issues, that was clearly lacking. The organization still today has 220 employees across football and business, and there is one HR person, and they also have to do administrative responsibilities. So clearly, this is something that they need to look at holistically.
You know, whenever these things break out, whatever the lane or industry, it typically is not just one organization. You know the NFL well. You know its history. We've seen former players drag their girlfriends by their hair across elevator thresholds, and we were told by the commissioner then, Goodell, that there'd be a women's council, 5 women on a council. They were going to look at these issues. Do you think that this sort of thing is potentially more widespread in the NFL, that we'll see more of it pop now that 15 women have come forward?
I don't want to speculate about the internal ongoings of other organizations, but I think Emily Applegate, as you heard earlier, made a good point when she talks about entering a male-dominated field. I think that is something that the industry as a whole has to reckon with, especially with the cultural moment that we're in at this time.
Yeah, and what I was speaking about is specifically in the lane of domestic violence. And what I couple all of that is with just experiences by women in the NFL. So my question for you now is specific to the Redskins. They're getting ready to change their name. Is anybody talking about that being like a reinvention point, if you will?
Yeah, I think this sort of rebrand, they hope that, they hope to cleanse the organization. Obviously, we saw in the last week or so, 3 employees left the team in regards to this report. And I think you have a head coach at the top in Ron Rivera who, while he's being asked to do a lot, he's seen around the league as a good and earnest person who's going to do the right thing. He said in a statement last night that his daughter works for the team. She's a social media coordinator, and he will not stand, obviously, for a culture like this for his own family to work in. So I think they hope certainly that this marks a new chapter, and Ron Rivera saying, please don't judge us on what we were, please judge us on what we will be.
All right. Those women coming forward to help them get to that place of where they will be. Sam 48, thank you, and thanks for your reporting.
Thank you.
Senate Republicans have ramped up their investigation into Hunter Biden's Ukraine dealings while his father was vice president. What Fox News has learned about reports of potential subpoenas.
Obviously, with the financial.
But no earlier, we're also learning that 4 security personnel for the governor are now in quarantine, one of them describing symptoms. The lieutenant governor also currently under quarantine. All are awaiting their test results, Brianna.
All right, Lucy, thank you so much for that update from Denver. We have more on our breaking news. Dr. Fauci speaking moments ago and warning that the U.S. will see more pandemics like this one. Plus, churches are now suing California's governor over the ban on singing, and anger erupts at a public meeting to debate forcing kids to wear masks in schools.
The meeting is adjourned.
We knew it was coming. The signs were all there. We knew we had to change, but we didn't. Destroying wild habitats, exploiting wildlife.
What I have done with my career is just to make sure that there's a democratization of access to opportunity for every child in our country. And by the way, I was white when my father drove a truck. I know that black and brown young people in our country have far greater obstacles than I ever had. And that's kind of the core of my candidacy. I'm running as a marquee promoter.
I was just going to, Senator, you're making it crystal clear how you want to have people view the Kennedy name and the Kennedy mystique. Let me ask you this. I know you were a Ted Kennedy fan. I know you were my guess is you would call yourself back in the day a Kennedy Democrat. How powerful is that brand? And do you feel as if you're being unfairly penalized because of that brand?
Well, look at, people are rallying to my side. I have the vast, overwhelming number of mayors have endorsed me. State representatives, state senators, Mayor Marty Walsh in Boston. They have all rallied to my side because I have done the job. I have led and delivered for Massachusetts and for the country. I have more than 500 laws that are on the books because I was able to navigate through the process. And so for me, this whole campaign is going to be determined by our records and whether or not we've led, whether or not we've delivered for Massachusetts. And I have done that job, and people are rallying to my side. I just left Fall River, where all of these public officials just stood by my side. I'm traveling around the state here today, and the response is just overwhelmingly positive.
Well, Senator Ed Markey, it's not easy campaigning in the midst of a pandemic. I know Massachusetts is in a better place than many of the states in the Sun Belt, so stay safe out there. While you do it, I imagine a bus tour is a lot different than it has been. Yes, sir.
Well, yeah, I will say this, that Massachusetts just reported a 17% unemployment record. So from a healthcare perspective, yes, we're minimizing the harm from the healthcare perspective, but there is an economic cost and people are suffering. And I know they're at their kitchen tables trying to figure out how to pay their bills. And it's absolutely imperative that we remember that as we have these battles on the floor of the Senate over the next 2 weeks. And I'm going to go down and battle for them to make sure they get the help they need for their families. They did not cause these problems. Trump has been criminally negligent and a racist simultaneously, and a science denier. And I'm going to be down there on the floor fighting for them every single day.
Senator Ed Markey, Senator from Massachusetts. It's going to be a fascinating primary that a lot of us are following. Thanks for coming on and sharing your perspective. We also, by the way, have invited Senator Markey's opponent, Democratic Congressman Joe Kennedy, to join us. We plan to have him on soon as well. Katie, over to you.
In Chuck, a federal judge has delayed the deadline for the release of migrant children held by ICE. What does it mean for the possibility of more family separations? The man who wrote the book on it, NBC's Jacob Soboroff, will join us with the latest. And Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is facing mounting pressure to mandate masks and reclose businesses. That is next.
$9.95. Don't wonder what to do next. Take action right.
Experience the adventure.
After he was on the board, and that was it. And there's nobody.
Well, you had a lot of time. Isn't this something you want to get to the bottom of?
No, because I trust my son.
And in March, Senate Home.
Criminal negligence. That's pretty steep. Criminal negligence. I don't know if he needs to be charged with criminal negligence or just blind, blatant behavior. Wow. Unreal. Good luck to all of us. And shalom. Unbelievable.
And Security Chair Ron Johnson said Americans need answers.
It's not our fault that Joe Biden and Hunter Biden got wrapped up in the whole Ukrainian story, but we're not closing our eyes to this. Joe Biden has never adequately answered these questions. I've said repeatedly, if there's wrongdoing, the American people need to understand it.
I want to bring in former Justice Department prosecutor Jim Trusty. Jim, good to see you.
Well, let's watch this for a second before I turn this off.
This investigation, how do you peel away the layers to get to whatever the truth is? You've got these subpoenas coming. What are you expecting to see?
Just like an onion. You peel one layer off, and then there's another layer.
Well, I think that they're doing what's pretty typical in that context, which is to kind of start on the periphery, start on the outside, and work your way in. So they go to folks that are advisors, and they try to question them and find out, even if those people unwittingly help the investigation move forward, in other words, give information that they don't know is hurtful to Joe Biden or Hunter Biden, and they dig through that before actually moving closer to the actual targets, like Hunter Biden. So that's a pretty typical starting point. That looks like that's where they're going right here.
So what are they looking for exactly? Because if you're going to dig, it would help to maybe have a roadmap, or you don't need that. You just look for anything that's questionable.
Well, I mean, that's, I guess, ultimately a political question, whether they're just fishing. But look, there's some pretty core facts that are public and that are pretty damning. And that is that Hunter Biden, while he might have had some skills when it comes to, impregnating Arkansas strippers and seducing his brother's wife, he didn't have anything to do with the energy sector. There was no skill set there. The only thing on his resume that made him attractive was the last name of Biden. So the fact that he's on a board getting paid, hundreds of thousands of dollars a year or more to render advice to a board of directors for which he's thoroughly unqualified, that's a starting point that people get. I mean, that is basically nepotism. It might be worse. It might be pay for play to access to the vice president. So I suspect what they're looking at is not just those core facts, which were kind of admitted by Joe Biden in a bragging fashion, but whether or not there's a quid pro quo, whether you can actually show governmental policy movement based on the relationship that then Vice President Biden had with the Ukraine. So that's probably where they're going. That's a much more difficult thing to uncover and prove than the simple fact of nepotism, which is pretty clear.
You started off with something incendiary there with the stripper comment, and I'm wondering why. I do know that if your father was vice president, I have read that it could come down to a bribery question, or were you just making a quip?
Oh, I'm mostly just being a smart aleck on a Friday and wishing we were talking about the Redskin problems. But no, look, I mean, the point is not to go after Hunter Biden on a personal level. The point is he brings nothing to the table for any energy company to want to hire him to pump gas, much less be on the board of directors. So there's no skill set there that relates to the work he was being hired for.
Jim, before I let you go, outside of the politics of all of this, what is the legality, the risk that Hunter Biden would face, potentially his father, if they should find something? And of course, we don't want to speculate on what that would be, but is there legal risk?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's minimal when you have a congressional oversight committee. And of course, the committee has basically said, all we're doing is investigating this until late summer. So that by itself kind of truncates it, makes it sound like it's more of a political exercise, which really hurts the credibility of the committee. But presumably they could be looking at things like violations of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act or corollaries to that, bribery or wire fraud or mail fraud. So there are potential federal statutes in play. I think if they announce that they're going to do this and be done within a couple of months, that's kind of like declaring the end of the war before you've started it. So I'm not particularly convinced that they're going to come out with some sort of overwhelming evidence in that short period of time.
Jim Trusty, thank you for joining me. Have a great weekend. Good to see you.
All right, you too, Harris.
We are getting close to the beginning of the school year. Very close for some people who might have thought maybe August would be the time. Many districts are now forced to make a choice about in-person classes versus the continued digital learning mode. How those decisions are made as our children's education hangs in the balance. I sat down with Sean Hannity for my upcoming special, The Fight for America. We did a deep dive on a host of tough issues. I'm going to play a little bit of that next.
The Fauci Pouchy. So, there you go.
Whatever works. Grady, thank you very much. Remember, no one Biden, Grady. You're working.
Really against wearing masks.
Well, that was Commissioner Bill Lee's position. That's what he's the one who he told people who were opposed to the mask mandate to come to this meeting. And beforehand, he spoke to them in a little rally outside the meeting. I mean, he told them that he's supportive of masks. He just doesn't think that it's something that the government should mandate. And another commissioner has said that as well. As far as people there, I would say some of them are for masks. They just don't think that it should be mandated. And other of them think that they pose serious health concerns. They don't want to be breathing in their own CO2. So I'd say it's really a mix.
It's a mix. All right, Connor, thank you so much for telling us what it was like in the room. We really appreciate you being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Speaking of school, as the president pushes for them to reopen, will he send his own son back to school? The White House will respond. Plus, the game show host who said that doctors are lying about the virus, which the president cited his opinion, reveals that his son has now tested positive. And breaking news, Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg revealing that her cancer has returned and she's undergoing chemotherapy. We'll have her statement ahead.
This is Kate. Hey. She takes 2 prescriptions.
That's bad about her cancer. That's bad.
So in a situation where we're testing, tracing, and that positive infection rate is 3% or less, yeah, absolutely. I think that we could probably actually hope to save more American lives. In a situation like Florida that you just highlighted, absolutely not. There's nothing you can do on the margins there when broader policy is misguided. In Florida, we don't have enough ICU beds. There's not enough ICU nurses, frankly, even if there are enough beds, to care for the patients with end-stage renal disease, which is a common complication of COVID-19. What we're seeing, Katie, and this false narrative about death rates declining, all the cases is because of increase in testing. That's such a false narrative because since the beginning of June, deaths have increased 200%. Now, 1 in 5 individuals that get tested in Florida turn out positive. So everything is correlated. In Texas, a 300% rise in deaths since June 1, with a positive testing rate of about 16%. It's alarming, the correlation here. So we need to get rid of this false narrative that the president keeps wanting to put out there.
Dr. Gupta, I'm curious, you're in the Northwest. I would argue that California, Oregon, and Washington, for the most part, those public health officials listen more to their scientists than their political donors, right? But we're seeing an outbreak on the West, a surge on the West, not nearly, maybe not quite as bad right now as the Sun Belt, but it's not that far off from the Sun Belt. What is this? What should we make of this, right? Here we have one set of states doing some major public health measures, one set of states not, and yet we're still seeing surges.
Chuck, it's such an important question. And the fact of the matter is, even though Governor Inslee, Governor Newsom, Governor Brown are highlighting public health officials, it doesn't necessarily mean people cooperating with mask mandates. If you look at a recent graphic in the New York Times today, enforcement, actually cooperation with masking in California is variable. It depends on the zip code. Some people are wearing it, some people are not. In Washington State, we have a massive outbreak happening in the center of the state of Yakima. The patients I'm caring for are getting life flighted here to Seattle. 1 in 3 in a survey folks living in Yakima are actually wearing a mask. So this is about enforcement. This is about strong leadership. This is about Americans doing what we're asking them to do. This is why we need to talk more about enforcement, not just about what we should be doing in terms of legislation.
Gotcha.
And Dr. Vin Gupta, Doctor, thank you very much. Appreciate all of your time. Chuck, over to you.
And I do have more questions for Dr. Gupta, but the good news is I will be able to ask them in a couple hours. A federal judge extended the deadline for the release of migrant children. Does this development mean we are more likely to see what some experts have called family separation 2.0? And a new update in the Ahmaud Arbery case from Georgia. We're watching MSNBC.
We've always put safety first. And we all...
So when you try to arrange the elements on it asymmetrically, you are playing with design fire. But Langdon succeeds brilliantly.
Online only, most other students in classes 2 days a week. Harris.
Matt Finn, thank you. And I invite you to a program to watch on Sunday. I'll be hosting a Fox News special, Harris Faulkner Presents The Fight for America, because as you often hear me say, if we're going to fight, let's fight for something together. My guests and I will talk about, and they will debate each other, on where we are as a nation when it comes to bringing ourselves together as Americans. My guests will include Senator Tim Scott, MLK's niece, Alveda King, Mark Cuban, who owns the Dallas Mavericks and is a businessman, as you know, NFL veteran Herschel Walker, and our very own Sean Hannity, a voice that you don't often see to sit down for an interview. Sean says it's important to remember the hero cops that put their lives on the line for us every day.
Can we not forget when the shooting took place in Washington, and remember those 2 Capitol Hill officers when Steve Scalise got shot? All right, I carried a firearm. I've been a pistol marksman since I'm 10 or 11. Carried a gun my whole life. Carry prevent my whole life. Big believer in gun safety too. On top of that, and the 2 officers went in an open field against a guy who had a rifle that was hidden. Harris, you know what your odds are of winning that battle? Next to 0 against a rifle, but they did it anyway. On 9/11/01, when everybody was coming down, were we gonna forget the cops and the firemen and the paramedics and the first responders? All these great Americans, they were going up. That's the 99%.
And then we got into it about what has happened in the weeks since the death of George Floyd, a deep conversation, some that you won't anticipate what Sean will say. It's just a small taste of it. Tune in this Sunday at 10 p.m. Eastern right here on Fox News Channel. Meanwhile, new accusations of liberal bias on college campuses as a top university is telling students to read a book equating conservatism with racism, what the founder of one conservative group says people should do to press back.
Experience boost. What will you do when the power goes out?
And just in, more retailers joining the move to require customers to wear masks in all of its stores. CNN's Christina Alessi is joining me right now. And Christina, this is Lowe's and Home Depot here.
Correct. They are both requiring masks nationwide, following on really a cascade of corporate announcements over the last 48 hours. It's quite remarkable here to see companies acting in the absence of a federal mandate. So both Home Depots and Lowe's will require customers to wear masks starting either July 20th or July 21st. Home Depot saying that it'll provide masks for people who do not have one. We're reaching out to Lowe's to see what it will provide for people who show up without masks. But let me just give you some color here. It is really hard for these companies to go ahead and enforce these policies. In fact, last night I got some documents from Starbucks training module that outlines 3 scenarios where customers may not want to put the mask on, and it really trains employees on how to de-escalate these situations. But even still, there is a risk that it just gets ugly. That's why the companies wanted the federal government to act. And just today, just a couple minutes before coming on, I also reported that a top business lobbying group renewed calls from the federal to the federal government and some state governments to go ahead with mask mandates, reduce the confusion about which localities and which states have them or which states don't, and make it a more unified and uniform mask order. But they are really turning to the government for that leadership, and in the absence of that, these companies are forced to act on their own given the rising coronavirus cases around the country. Brianna, this is really an issue that companies are struggling with, clearly from every indication that I've gotten in my reporting.
Yeah, I think this is one of the biggest stories this week, and we see why companies are doing it, Christina. 7 in 10 Americans say that mask wearing is very important and should be mandated. Christina Alessi, thank you so much for your work this week. As a legal fight is playing out in Georgia, the governor suing Atlanta's mayor over a mask mandate there. Dr. Anthony Fauci says local leaders need to be forceful about getting people to wear masks. Plus, a Republican senator is called out for racist comments after what he suggested was the reason the pandemic is disproportionately affecting Latinos.
Silver American Eagles have...
To me, wearing the masks is as obvious and as easy to understand as a person falling off of a log. We have in this area a group of people called Amish or Mennonite people. By and large, the majority of those Mennonite people still want to get around and do things in a primitive type form. It's a part of their religion towards what they believe. They feel like that they'll become corrupted with all these modernizations of automobiles and TVs and computers and satellites and stuff like that. Occasionally, driving down a state road, you'll run up on a group of people driving a horse and buggy. That's either on a country road or a state road. If those same people decided that they was going to pull out onto a interstate, they probably wouldn't last an hour out there before they would cause a major eruption. That's the reason why it's against the law to go up and down the interstates, either with a horse or a horse and buggy. We know that by doing so, it is going to be harmful and it's going to be careless to your life and to other people's lives by getting out on the interstate. People driving 60, 70, some of them 80 miles an hour with a horse and buggy. If you're on a country road or a state road, you can get by with it, but even then, it's still dangerous. And they still have to have proper lighting and all kinds of different safety devices on their buggies and on their horses and stuff to try to prevent from somebody running over them. Occasionally an accident will happen. But by and large, it's uniform. They know that they're supposed to have twinkling lights. They know that they're supposed to have reflectors. And they know that they're supposed to do things in a certain format to try to limit or prevent any type of major accident. To me, looking at the mask situation pertaining to people wearing masks, it fits under that same criteria, that it shouldn't be even questionable of whether or not during this pandemic of people wearing masks to protect other people from possibly becoming contaminant with a disease. And the reason why is because we know that it's lethal. We know that it's harmful to certain people that don't carry right DNA. And we know sometimes you can be a super carrier in a situation, regardless whether you be in a swimming pool or a party or a ball game or a church or a political event. To me, it's a no thinker. It shouldn't be even addressed as being even a subject similar towards putting a horse and buggy out on the interstate. But how come people can't see it that way is still beyond me. Because obviously people want to be defiant, certain people, and it doesn't matter if you're doing it for their benefit or for the general public's benefit. They want to be bullheaded, they want to be defiant, and because of it, they cause these issues to come about to society, which tears a democracy society apart. So it's not just all Trump, but I will admit Trump did not help matters none by steering clear by not wearing masks. But you got to keep in mind that at the time, whenever this pandemic first hit, the majority of the states didn't even have extra masks. It's only been 4 months into this to where now you can find masks either online or going to a certain store and they'll offer you a mask. So as the virus is evolving, so are we. And that's the part that I don't think people get or understand, especially these bullheaded people that think that they can start a fight. I've seen fights over people not wanting to wear a mask while other people was trying to mandate it. And it's, to me, it's just absolutely asinizing that anybody wouldn't want to wear a mask. Now, if you got some sort of a breathing problem, an asthma problem, maybe you're on oxygen, maybe you got some sort of issues, medical issues, then maybe it's quite understandable. But even at that rate, you should still have to have some sort of a card or some sort of proof from a doctor saying this is the reason why that I don't wear this mask, a regular mask, out in the general public. It's because I've got this proof by this doctor that says because of my allergies or because of my asthma or because of this, or because of that, this is the reason why that I can't wear this mask. Now, if you have something like that, then we understand. But just to get out here and be belligerent and be hard-headed and bullheaded, it would be the same thing if you took that same group of Amish people or Mennonite people and they decided that they was going to be hard-headed in the same form and start driving their horses and buggies out on a major corridor, out on a major interstate, knowing that it was going to create havoc and chaos. To me, I put both of them into that same severity of using one concept versus another, because it's a no thinker. You know, it should be a no thinker that you don't need to put a horse and buggy out on the interstate. It should be a no thinker that people need to wear masks to protect not only their own lives but to protect others in case they do have a virus and they're not aware that they are a carrier of the virus. And this should have been mandated 4 months ago. And like I said, the reason why that it wasn't mandated is because we had a whacked out president that didn't think this thing was that serious. And plus, there wasn't enough masks available for everybody to wear a mask at that time. Now it's changed. The dynamics has changed. People need to wear a mask. People need to stay off the interstate with a horse and buggy. Good luck to all of us. And shalom. And yes, there'll probably be secret police associated with the military that will have to go in and de-escalate various situations in various cities or various states because of the uprisings that's going on with the people becoming violent during protest. It's one thing if you're protesting and you're not demonstrating violence. But if you're out here burning buildings, tearing down stuff, tipping over cars, if you're out here busting out glasses, raiding people's businesses, whatever, there should be a special goon squad. I'm going to call them a goon squad. There should be a special federal mandated goon squad that if a situation gets that far out of hand, call in the goons and the goons will take care of it. The goons will put out the fires. The goons will throw them in jail. Because I guarantee you some of these guys that wear some of these military equipment, you don't want to mess with these people. They are hard body. They wear hard body equipment. They are accurate shooters. They are pinpoint to what they try to, their objective is towards achieving peace and utopia. You don't want to go up against these people because these people are lethal. Average people in society that don't have this type of special training does not have a snowball chance in hell in going up against the goon squads. Not a chance in hell. The president is going to have to mandate some sort of a goon squad protection plan throughout each state to where if it breaks out to the point that all a mayor has to do is pick up the phone to make a telephone call to the goon squads, that the goon squads will be there just within a matter of minutes. Because there are certain things that police officers just can't handle whenever it comes to somebody with a handgun going up against somebody with a long arm rifle, kind of like what went on out there in Las Vegas or what went on out there in Orlando, Florida, or there's been other massive shooters shootings that's went on that that by and large the normal police just don't have no business towards being involved in nothing like that, because there's going to be heavy casualties. I hate to say it, but we've reached that pivotal point when it comes to security and safety here in America that sometimes the goon squads need to be called in. And they need to take care of what needs to be taken care of. And they will be protected, federally protected, to where they will never, ever have to stand in front of a judge in these regards unless it is just totally gross negligence and they do something that is just totally out of hand. But once more, that's where you have to have supervisors on the job. That's where you have to have trained people that is trained to evaluate each situation on a case-by-case basis. And is it going to cost money? Sure it is. Is it going to cause turmoil? Probably. But is it reached a level of being imperative that we have something like this? The way it looks like it is. Because if these situations are breaking out in Atlanta, New York, Chicago, Seattle, Washington, and other places throughout the country, it's just a matter of time before it's going to be breaking out, even in smaller areas, and in even possibly even some of these smaller towns, because of people becoming violent and hostile. We as a society, as a civilized society, shouldn't have to go through rigmaroles such as this in our communities towards bad actors coming in and causing property damage to our own personal property. We shouldn't have to worry about bullets flying in the middle of the streets. We shouldn't have to worry about becoming victims or being vandalized by these type of occurrences that obviously are taking off, and as far as I'm concerned, has become a pandemic in and of itself. It's become a pandemic because you're already dealing with basically a lawlessness society, a group of people that think that they can get out here and do whatever that they want to do, and there's not going to be no serious consequences for doing it. And you're dealing with a society that's never been spanked or whipped pertaining to the discipline features that parenting children should have never been taken away from the families. And you're dealing with some of these kids that have been given everything in the world, and you've given them the farm, and they're still not satisfied in what you've given them. They've got a chip on their shoulder, and obviously they need to be taken down a notch or two. Especially those that want to get out here and commit havoc and harm upon to society. There's no doubt people are hurting. People are sitting around their dinner tables are talking about how that they're going to survive because they have missed this payment and that payment, and they couldn't afford this and couldn't afford that, and things is the apple cart has been upset because of the coronavirus. And there's no doubt that the coronavirus got brought in here not by choice towards the Homo sapiens wanting this to occur. But you have to sit down and try to understand why it occurred. And the reason why it occurred, I believe, is because of people being disobedient to not just each other, but to God Almighty. And God has basically lifted his protection shield off of the planet, and now Satan is running wild towards being on a rampage, not only here in America, but throughout the planet. And until we as a society realize this, a civilized society, and work and do something to counter-react against this, things is only going to escalate and get worse and worse and worse, regardless whether you be in America on this side of the continent or you be on some other country somewhere. I mean, they claim that the violence of women being brutally raped and murdered over in the country of Mexico goes beyond anything that you could ever even imagine. Once more, this is Satan entering into mean-spirited people and becoming brutal to the innocent. Whenever this occurs on this level, that's whenever God steps in and brings misery to that group of people. And until that group of people wakes up in understanding this is why this happened, it's only going to get worse. I couldn't even begin to fathom if I was a female or I had 2 or 3 children living in Mexico right now, towards what kind of conditions that you would have to be exposed to on a day-to-day, night-to-night level. And it's not just that way in Mexico. It's all throughout this planet, to where the devil has been unleashed. And he's wreaking havoc out to steal, kill, and destroy, just like the Bible talks about. That in the last days, he will rise up in great wrath. And until we, as a civilized society, as a Christian society, understand that this is what is going on, and this is what it's going to take to put out these embers to go up against this type of resistment movement, until we pull together as a unit, it's only going to get worse. Good luck to all of us. Good luck to each and every one of us, because I've seen this slipping around the corner, give or take about 30 plus years ago, where we was going to wind up being today in conjunction of what didn't take place that should have took place 30 plus years ago during the Reagan and the Bush administration. I seen this coming, not just on a financial, economical resistance type calamity pertaining to us being over $25 trillion in debt, but I seen other matters that was boiling, the perfect storm that was forming. And I knew the way that the founder of the Windmill Ministries was being attacked, it was just a matter of time before all hell was fixing to be unleashed upon to society. And that's basically where we're at right now. All hell has been released out into society. And these people that think that they're playing games towards all this witchcraft and all this supernatural, paranormal, devilish, wicked, evil, demonic stuff, these people that think that they can play games are the majority of the people right now that is falling ill and possibly even dying. Because God ain't going to put up with such foolishness as that. He didn't put up with such foolishness as that throughout other cultures and other generations. And he will put that group or that generation to their knees, just like he talks about in the first 4 chapters of Revelations, to go back and to do thy first works over again and learn how you're supposed to conduct yourself, not only in the eyes of each other, but in the eyes of God.